The morning alarm rang through the metal halls of Nexus 7 Station, like it had every day for the past 3 years. Lihana rolled out of her narrow bunk and stretched her arms above her head. Her roommate Choi Yuna was already gone, probably to the early combat training session that Hana always skipped. Hana walked to the small mirror bolted to their wall and looked at her reflection. Her black hair hung loose around her shoulders, messy from sleep. Dark circles under her eyes showed how little rest she had gotten. Again, she had been up late in the engineering labs with Kim Do-hyun, trying to figure out why their practice ship kept losing power during flight tests. The Galactic Defense Academy was not kind to humans. Most of the other species were stronger, faster, or smarter in ways that made the training feel impossible. The four-armed Veltans could operate ship controls that took humans 2 people to manage. The crystal-bodied Nexari could calculate flight paths in their heads while humans needed computers. And the reptilian Saura could see in spectrums that humans could not even imagine. But Hana was still here. 3 years into the 5-year program, and she had not quit like so many other humans before her. She tied her hair back with a simple band and pulled on her gray academy uniform. The fabric was designed for Veltan bodies and always felt too loose on her human frame. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual morning noise. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of species filled the long metal tables. Hana grabbed a tray of food that looked edible and found her usual spot near the back corner. Kim Do-hyun was already there, poking at something green on his plate. "Another sleepless night?" he asked without looking up. "The power coupling problem is driving me crazy," Hana said, sitting down across from him. "I keep thinking there has to be a solution we are missing." "Maybe some problems do not have solutions," said a voice behind her. Hana turned to see Park Min-ho standing with his tray. His uniform was perfectly pressed and his hair was cut in the regulation style. Everything about him screamed perfect cadet. He sat down without being invited. "That is a very human way of thinking," Min-ho continued. "Always believing you can fix everything if you just try hard enough. Better than giving up before you start," Hana replied. Before Min-ho could answer, the cafeteria's speakers crackled to life. "All cadets report to the main assembly hall immediately. This is not a drill." The 3 humans looked at each other. Emergency assemblies were rare and usually meant bad news. They left their food and joined the crowd of cadets flowing toward the hall. The assembly hall was a massive room with curved walls that could hold every cadet on the station. As they found seats, Hana noticed that even the instructors looked nervous. At the front of the room stood Instructor Vextar, his forearms crossed over his scaled chest. His yellow eyes scanned the crowd like a predator watching prey. Vextar was old even for a Sauroch. Scars covered his green scales and his left arm moved stiffly from an old injury. He had been at the academy longer than anyone could remember, and his advanced combat classes had a reputation for being brutal. Most cadets feared him. "Cadets," Vextar's voice carried easily through the hall without amplification. "Today I will speak to you about failure." The room fell silent. Even the usual whispers and shuffling stopped. For 317 years, this academy has offered a trial known as the Void Walker Simulation. It is a test of skill, courage, and decision-making under impossible conditions. In all that time, no cadet has ever completed it successfully. Murmurs started to spread through the crowd. Hana had heard rumors about the Void Walker trial, but she thought it was just a legend. The simulation places you in command of a rescue vessel approaching a dying solar system. 13 civilian ships are trapped by gravitational anomalies and stellar debris. Your mission is to save them all while your own ship suffers systematic failures. The scenario is based on a real event that occurred in the Kepler Nebula. Vextar's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear him. "I lost my entire fleet in that system. 3,000 souls under my command, dead because I could not find a way to save them. I created this simulation hoping that someday, someone would show me what I should have done differently." The instructor's forearms spread wide as he addressed the crowd. "I am offering this trial to any cadet who believes they can succeed where others have failed. Anyone who completes the Void Walker trial will graduate immediately with full honors, regardless of their current academic standing or remaining years of study." The hall erupted in excited chatter. Immediate graduation was worth almost any risk. But then Vextar raised one scaled hand and silence returned. "However, I must warn you, this trial is impossible for any organic mind to solve. The mathematics are clear. The physics are absolute. There is no solution that allows for the survival of all ships, including your own. I have run the calculations myself thousands of times. Hana felt something stir in her chest. Impossible. That word again. Everyone always said things were impossible until someone did them anyway. I will not lie to you. Vextar continued. Previous cadets who attempted this trial did not survive the simulation. The neural feedback from experiencing ship destruction and death while connected to the pod systems can cause permanent psychological damage or worse. This is not a game. The excitement in the room died quickly. No one wanted to risk their life for a trial that could not be won. The trial will take place tomorrow at noon. Any cadet who wishes to attempt it should report to Simulation Bay 7. I expect no volunteers. Vextar turned to leave the stage, clearly considering the assembly finished. Around Hana, cadets began to stand and file toward the exits, talking in hushed voices about the impossible trial. But Hana remained seated. Her mind was racing through what she had heard. A rescue mission with systematic ship failures, 13 civilian vessels to save, a dying star system. The instructor had said it was impossible, but he had also said it was based on a real event. If it happened in reality, there had to be some solution. Hana, Dohyun whispered, you have that look. What look? She asked, still staring at the front of the room where Vextar had been standing. The same look you had before you rewired the training simulator to run faster, Minho said. The look that means you're about to do something stupid. Hana stood up slowly. Around her, the last few cadets were leaving their seats. The hall was nearly empty now. She reached up and pulled the band from her hair, then gathered it all back and retied it more securely. Instructor Vextar, she called out. The old Sorok stopped at the edge of the stage and turned his yellow eyes toward her. Yes, Cadet Lee? I volunteer for the trial. The few remaining cadets froze. Dohyun grabbed her arm, but she gently pulled free. Minho's mouth fell open in shock. Vextar studied her for a long moment. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his tail swished once behind him, a sign of agitation in his species. You understand the risks, human? Yes, sir. And you believe you can succeed where 3 centuries of cadets have failed? Hana smiled then, the kind of smile that had gotten her in trouble since childhood. The smile that appeared whenever someone told her something could not be done. I guess we'll find out tomorrow, sir. Vextar's scaled lips pulled back slightly, showing his sharp teeth. It might have been a smile, or it might have been something else entirely. Indeed we will, Cadet Lee. Indeed we will. As she walked out of the assembly hall, Hana could hear the whispers starting behind her. By tomorrow, everyone on the station would know that a human had volunteered for the impossible trial. She was looking forward to proving them all wrong. News traveled fast on a space station. By evening, every cadet on Nexus 7 knew that Lee Hana had volunteered for the Voidwalker trial. By morning, half the galaxy seemed to know too. Hana woke to find her small room crowded with beings she had never seen before. News reporters from 3 different species clustered around her bunk, holding recording devices and asking questions in languages she did not understand. Choi Yuna stood in the corner looking overwhelmed. How did they get in here? Hana asked, pushing through the crowd toward the door. Press passes, Yuna replied weakly. They have been here since dawn. The reporters followed Hana into the hallway, still shouting questions. Something about human arrogance. Something else about death wishes. She caught fragments in Galactic Standard but ignored them all. At the end of the hall, station security finally arrived to clear the corridor. The cafeteria was worse. Every table was full, and not just with cadets. Senior officers, instructors, and even some civilians had come to watch the spectacle. Conversation stopped when Hana entered, then started again twice as loud. She heard her name mixed with words like suicide and foolish and typical human. Dohyun waved her over to their usual table. He had saved her a seat, but even he looked worried. The betting pool started at midnight, he said quietly as she sat down. Current odds are 800 to 1 against you surviving the first hour. That seems generous, Hana replied, picking at her breakfast. Her stomach felt too tight to eat much. This is not a joke, Minho said from across the table. He looked like he had not slept. I spent all night researching the trial. Do you know what happened to the last cadet who tried it? Hana shook her head. Cadet Zethmar from Rigel Prime. He lasted 43 minutes before his ship's core overloaded. The neural feedback put him in a coma for 6 months. When he woke up, he could not remember his own name. He quit the academy and became a cargo hauler on the Outer Rim. That was 12 years ago, Do-hyun added. Before him, Cadet Rilana made it 38 minutes. She survived the simulation but never spoke again, just stares at walls all day. Hana put down her fork. Are you two trying to cheer me up? We are trying to talk sense into you, Minho said. It is not too late to withdraw. No one would blame you. Everyone would blame me, Hana corrected. Every human in the academy would be judged by what I do today. If I quit now, it proves what they all think about us. Who thinks about us? That we are too emotional, too reckless, that we do not belong here. Hana gestured around the cafeteria. Look at them. They are not here to watch me succeed. They are here to watch me fail. She was right, and they all knew it. The assembled crowd was not showing support. They were waiting for entertainment. What if you do fail? Yuna asked quietly. She had been silent until now, but her question carried weight. What if the trial really is impossible? Hana considered this. She had been asking herself the same question all night. Then I fail, she said finally. But I fail trying something that matters. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the cafeteria entrance. Instructor Vextar had arrived, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and his yellow eyes scanning the crowd. When he spotted Hana, he walked directly to her table. Cadet Lee, he said formally, you have 1 hour before the trial begins. I suggest you use it wisely. Yes, sir. Vexatar hesitated, then leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper that only the humans could hear. In all my years, I have never seen a cadet volunteer so quickly for something so dangerous. Most species would consider this behavior unwise. Most species are not human, sir. The old Sorok's scarred face showed something that might have been approval. No, he agreed. They are not. He straightened and spoke in his normal voice again. The trial will be broadcast academy-wide as tradition demands. You may have observers in the control room if you wish. Thank you, sir. After Vextar left, Hana finished her breakfast in silence. Around them, the noise level continued to grow as more beings packed into the cafeteria. She tried to block out the sound and focus on what lay ahead. The walk to Simulation Bay 7 felt like a death march. Word had spread beyond the academy now, and the corridors were lined with spectators. Some called out encouragement, but most just stared. Hana kept her eyes forward and her hair tied back securely. The simulation bay was a large room dominated by a single pod in the center. The pod looked like a metallic egg split in half, with a chair inside surrounded by neural interface cables. Around the room, screens and control panels showed readouts that Hana could not interpret. Do-hyun and Minho had followed her, along with Yuna, and about 20 other cadets who had managed to squeeze into the observation area. Through the glass, she could see the main assembly hall where hundreds more watched on large screens. Before we begin, Vextar announced, let me explain what you will experience. You will take command of the rescue vessel Harmony's Edge as it approaches the Kepler system. The ship has a crew of 50, standard armaments and rescue equipment for up to 200 survivors. He gestured to a display showing a star map. A red giant dominated the center, surrounded by debris and scattered ship markers. The dying star is in its final collapse phase. Gravitational anomalies make normal jump travel impossible. 13 civilian vessels are trapped at various points throughout the system. Your mission is to rescue all survivors and escape before the star goes supernova. How long do I have? Hana asked. The star will explode in approximately 2 hours simulation time. However, your ship will begin experiencing cascading system failures immediately. Past cadets have typically lost all power within the first hour. Hana nodded and approached the simulation pod. The chair looked comfortable enough, but the neural cables made her nervous. She had used basic simulators before, but nothing this advanced. The interface will feel completely real, Vextar continued. You will experience everything as if you were actually commanding a starship. Pain, fear, and death will all seem genuine. If your ship is destroyed, the shock may cause permanent psychological damage. I understand, sir. Hana sat in the chair and allowed the technicians to attach the neural cables to her head and arms. The metal contacts felt cold against her skin. Around the room, screens began showing her vital signs and brain activity. Any last words, Cadet Lee? Hana looked up at the observation window where her friends watched. Do-hyun gave her a thumbs up. Minho nodded seriously. Even Yuna looked like she was hoping for success. Just one question, sir, Hana said. In the real battle that this is based on, how many ships escaped? Vextar's expression grew dark. None, Cadet. Every vessel was lost, including my flagship. But some of the people survived, right? There had to be survivors, or how would anyone know what happened? A few escape pods were recovered days later by a patrol ship. Perhaps 30 souls out of 3,000. Hana smiled then, the same confident smile she had shown the day before. 30 is more than 0, sir. That means it is possible. Before Vextar could respond, she gestured to the technician. I am ready. The world dissolved around her as the simulation began. When reality returned, Hana was standing on the bridge of a starship looking out at a dying solar system. Behind her, a voice called out urgent status reports. Captain, we are receiving distress signals from 13 civilian vessels throughout the system. Navigation reports severe gravitational distortions. Engineering says we are already losing power to non-essential systems. Hana turned to face her simulated crew. They looked real enough to touch, their faces showing the kind of controlled panic that came with impossible situations. How long until the star explodes? She asked. 1 hour and 57 minutes, Captain. Then we better get started. In the observation room, her friends watched the screens showing her vital signs. Her heart rate was elevated but steady. Brain activity showed intense focus. She looks calm, Do-Yun observed. Too calm, Minho replied. She has no idea what she is about to face. But as they watched Hana take command of her simulated ship, something in her posture suggested otherwise. She moved with purpose, asking questions and giving orders with the confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Maybe she did know what she was about to face. Maybe that was exactly why she was smiling. The bridge of the Harmony's edge felt completely real under Hana's feet. She could smell the recycled air, hear the hum of the engines, and feel the slight vibration that meant they were moving through space. The neural interface was more advanced than anything she had experienced. Captain, called out her second officer, Ro Tae-hyun. He was a simulation, but his concern looked genuine. We have located the first group of civilian ships, 3 vessels trapped in a debris field near the 4th planet. Hana moved to the main display and studied the tactical readout. The 3 ships were civilian transports, each carrying about 50 people. They were caught between chunks of destroyed moon and the gravitational pull of a gas giant. What's their status? 2 are reporting engine failures. The 3rd has lost life support and is running on emergency power only. Time to reach them? 18 minutes at current speed. Hana nodded and turned to the engineering station. Report on our ship's condition. The engineer, a young woman who looked barely old enough to be on a starship, checked her displays. We are showing power fluctuations in the primary systems, Captain. Nothing critical yet, but the patterns suggest we will start losing major systems within the hour. Which systems will go first? Based on the failure cascade, probably artificial gravity, then long-range sensors, then main engines. This matched what Vexitar had told her. Past cadets had tried to save all 13 ships while fighting failing systems. They had spread themselves too thin and lost everything. Change course for the debris field, Hana ordered. But first I want to try something. She walked to the engineering console and began pulling up system displays. The Harmony's Edge was a standard rescue vessel, built for reliability rather than speed or firepower. It had everything needed for search and rescue operations, plus some things that were not needed at all. Captain? Taehyun looked confused as Hana began shutting down systems. We are going to save these people, she announced to the bridge crew, but we are going to do it differently than anyone expects. Her fingers moved across the controls, powering down the ship's recreational facilities. The gym, the meditation chambers, the officer's lounge all went dark. She rerouted that power to the shields and engines. Ma'am, those systems provide crew comfort during long missions, the engineer protested. We will not be on a long mission, Hana replied. We have less than 2 hours to save everyone and get out of here. Comfort is not a priority. In the observation room, the watching cadets murmured in confusion. On their screens, they could see Hana systematically shutting down parts of her own ship. What is she doing? Someone asked. She's making the ship more efficient, Do-Hyun realized, cutting out everything that's not essential. Vextar watched the displays with growing interest. In 3 centuries, no cadet had started by voluntarily reducing their ship's capabilities. Most tried to preserve every system as long as possible. Back on the bridge, Hana continued her preparations. She had the crew begin converting the ship's cargo bays into emergency shelters. The luxury passenger quarters were stripped of furniture and fitted with basic life support for maximum occupancy. Captain, we are approaching the debris field, the navigator reported. On screen, the main display showed a nightmarish scene. 3 civilian ships drifted helplessly among spinning chunks of rock and metal. The debris moved in chaotic patterns, making navigation nearly impossible. Rescue ships would need to thread between the obstacles while avoiding the gas giant's gravity well. Standard rescue protocol calls for tractor beams, Taehyun said. But in this debris field we would need to get dangerously close. Forget standard protocol, Hana said. We are going to do something different. She studied the tactical display for several minutes, her mind working through possibilities. The debris field was dangerous, but it was also predictable. Everything followed basic physics: mass, momentum, gravity. Navigator, plot a course through the center of the field. Maximum speed. Ma'am, that's extremely dangerous. One collision could destroy us. We are not going to collide with anything, Hana said confidently. We are going to use the debris. She began issuing rapid orders. The ship's small shuttles were launched without crews, their autopilots programmed with specific flight paths. As the Harmony's Edge raced into the debris field, the shuttles spread out in a complex pattern. What are those shuttles doing? The engineer asked. Creating a path, Hana replied. The shuttles began using their small tractor beams to nudge pieces of debris, changing their trajectories by tiny amounts. What looked like random movements was actually a carefully calculated sequence. The debris began moving in new patterns, opening a clear corridor toward the trapped civilian ships. Incredible, Taehyun breathed. She's choreographing the entire field. But just as they reached the first civilian ship, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. Captain, we are losing artificial gravity, the engineer reported. Primary systems are starting to fail. Hana had expected this. The simulation was programmed to begin degrading her ship's capabilities right on schedule. But she was ready. Emergency protocols, she announced. All crew to magnetic boots. Secure all loose equipment. As the artificial gravity died, the bridge crew activated their magnetic boots and continued working. Hana had prepared them for this moment, and they adapted quickly. Docking with the first civilian ship now, the navigator reported. The rescue operation began smoothly. The civilian ship with failing life support was evacuated first. Its 50 passengers transferred to the Harmony's Edge in under 10 minutes. But as they moved to the second ship, more alarms sounded. Long-range sensors are offline, the engineer announced. We are flying blind beyond 1,000 kilometers. This was also expected. Hana had studied the failure patterns from previous attempts. She knew exactly when each system would go down. Switch to passive sensors and visual confirmation, she ordered. And begin Phase 2 of the evacuation plan. Phase 2 involved something no previous cadet had attempted. Instead of keeping the rescued civilians on her ship, Hana began transferring them to the civilian vessels that still had working life support. She was using the entire group of ships as a connected fleet. Captain, this is highly irregular, Taehyun protested. Standard procedure is to consolidate survivors on the rescue vessel. Standard procedure assumes we have a functioning rescue vessel, Hana replied. In 30 minutes we will not. She was right. As they finished evacuating the debris field, the Harmony's Edge lost main engine power. They were now drifting on auxiliary thrusters with limited maneuverability. Ma'am, how do we reach the other trapped ships without main engines? The navigator asked. Hana smiled. She had been waiting for this question. We do not reach them, she said. We bring them to us. In the observation room, Vextar leaned forward. This was completely unprecedented. Every previous cadet had tried to fly their ship to each rescue site. But with failing engines, that approach always ended in disaster. What is she planning? Mino whispered. They were about to find out. Hana began issuing orders that sounded completely insane. She wanted the crew to start dismantling parts of their own ship. Strip the backup life support systems, she commanded. Remove the emergency power cells from the escape pods. Take apart anything we can spare. Captain, you are talking about cannibalizing our own vessel, the engineer protested. Exactly. Hana's plan was becoming clear. She was turning the Harmony's Edge into a mobile construction platform. Using parts from her own ship, she began building something that had never been attempted before. We are making rescue pods, she explained as the crew worked frantically. But not normal pods. These will be powered and capable of independent flight. The first custom rescue pod was assembled in 23 minutes using parts from the ship's recreational facilities, backup power systems, and even furniture from the officers' quarters. It was ugly and improvised, but it worked. "Launch Pod 1, Hana ordered. The makeshift rescue pod shot away from the Harmony's edge under its own power. Its destination was a medical transport trapped near the system's second planet. While her main ship drifted powerless, Hana was sending out mechanical extensions of herself. "Captain, we just lost environmental controls," the engineer reported. "Temperature is dropping and air circulation is failing." "Expected," Hana replied calmly. "How many more pods can we build?" "With the remaining materials? Maybe 4 more. Then we build 4 more. The watching cadets were stunned. In 1 hour, Hana had transformed a standard rescue operation into something completely new. She was not trying to preserve her ship. She was sacrificing it piece by piece to save others. "She's destroying herself to succeed," Do-hyun observed. "No," Vextar said quietly. "She is proving that destruction can be a form of creation." On the bridge of the dying Harmony's edge, Hana checked the countdown timer. 1 hour and 12 minutes until the star exploded. 9 civilian ships still needed rescue, and her ship was falling apart around her, but she was still smiling. The bridge of the Harmony's edge was now freezing cold and barely lit by emergency power. Hana's breath came out in white puffs as she worked at the command console. Around her, the crew continued their impossible task of building rescue pods from the bones of their own ship. "4th pod is ready for launch, Captain," reported the engineer, whose name tag read Kim Seoa. Her fingers were stiff from the cold, but she worked without complaint. "Target the school ship near the asteroid belt," Hana ordered. 300 children on board, life support failing." The pod shot away into space, carrying emergency supplies and a small tractor beam system cobbled together from parts of the ship's dining hall. It was insane that it worked, but somehow it did. "Captain, we have a problem," Taehyun called out from the sensor station. "The star is becoming unstable faster than predicted. We have maybe 40 minutes before it explodes, not the full hour we thought." Hana absorbed this information without changing expression. Around her, she could see the bridge crew starting to panic. 40 minutes to save 9 more ships when they could barely move their own vessel. "How many ships have we successfully rescued so far?" she asked. 4 civilian vessels are now in the safe zone beyond the gravity well, Seoa reported. "But Captain, at this rate, we save who we can and accept that we cannot save everyone." Hana turned to face her crew. "But we are not done yet." She walked to the engineering station and began pulling up ship schematics. The Harmony's edge was dying around them, but it still had mass. It still had momentum. And in space, those things could be weapons as easily as tools. "I need everyone to listen carefully," Hana announced. "We are going to do something that has never been attempted in the history of space rescue operations." She gestured to the main display, which showed the remaining 9 civilian ships scattered throughout the system. They were too far apart to reach with conventional methods, especially with a crippled vessel. "We are going to turn our ship into a shield." The crew stared at her in confusion. Taehyun was the first to understand. "Captain, you are talking about sacrificing the Harmony's edge to protect the other ships from the supernova blast." "Exactly. But that would mean we die." Hana finished calmly, "Unless we are very clever about how we do it." She began outlining a plan that sounded completely insane. The Harmony's edge would position itself between the dying star and the largest group of trapped civilian ships. When the star exploded, their vessel would absorb the initial shockwave and debris, creating a shadow zone where the other ships could survive. "The explosion will destroy us instantly," Seoa protested. "There is no way to survive being that close to a supernova." "Not if we stay with the ship," Hana agreed. "But we are not staying with the ship." Her plan became clear as she explained it. The crew would evacuate to the remaining escape pods just before the explosion. But instead of fleeing to safety, they would use the explosion itself as propulsion. "The shockwave from the supernova will push everything away from the star at incredible speed," she explained. "If we time it right, we can ride that wave to safety along with the civilian ships we are protecting." "That is completely theoretical," Taehyun said. "No one has ever tried to surf a supernova blast wave." "No one has ever needed to," Hana replied. "But the physics are sound. Force equals mass times acceleration. A supernova provides more acceleration than any engine ever built." In the observation room, the watching cadets were silent with shock. What they were seeing went beyond courage into something that looked like madness. "She cannot be serious," someone whispered. is going to sacrifice her entire ship, another cadet. Added Vextar watched the screens with an expression that might have been awe. In 3 centuries of running this simulation, no cadet had ever proposed using the disaster itself as a rescue tool. Instructor? Asked a young Veltan cadet. Is what she is planning actually possible? Vextar considered the question carefully. The mathematics are complex. In theory, a precisely positioned mass could create a protective shadow during a stellar explosion, and the shockwave could indeed provide propulsion for small craft. But the timing would have to be perfect. 1 second too early or too late and everything is destroyed. On the dying bridge, Hannah was already putting her plan into motion. The crew worked frantically to prepare the ship for its final mission. All remaining power was diverted to the structural integrity fields. Every piece of non-essential equipment was jettisoned to reduce mass and increase maneuverability. 26 minutes until stellar collapse, Cioa reported. Position report on the civilian ships? 7 vessels are clustered near the 3rd planet's moon. 2 more are drifting in open space near the system's edge. Hannah made the hardest decision of her life. We can only protect the 7 ships near the moon. The other 2 are too far away. It was the first time she had admitted that she could not save everyone. The weight of those words settled on the bridge like a physical presence. Captain, Taehyun said quietly, in the original battle that this simulation is based on, how many people do you think Instructor Vextar tried to save? All of them, Hannah replied without hesitation. He tried to save everyone and lost everyone. She looked around at her crew. These simulated people who felt so real that she cared about their lives. Sometimes, the only way to win is to accept that you cannot win. Everything, the harmonies. Edge began its final approach to the protective position. With no main engines, they relied on attitude thrusters and whatever momentum they could gather from gravitational slingshots around planetary bodies. 15 minutes to stellar collapse, Sewa announced. Begin crew evacuation to escape pods, Hannah ordered. But do not launch yet. We wait until the last possible moment. As her crew filed off the bridge, Hannah remained at the command console. She would be the last to leave, making final adjustments to the ship's position until the very end. Captain, Taehyun paused at the exit. What you are attempting? Even if it works, how do we know the escape pods will survive the shockwave? Hannah turned to look at him and her smile was different now. Less confident, more determined. We do not know, she admitted. But we know what happens if we do nothing. Alone on the bridge, Hannah made final preparations. She programmed the ship's computer to maintain position automatically and set the escape pod to launch exactly 30 seconds before stellar collapse. The timing had to be perfect. 10 minutes to stellar collapse, the computer announced in its calm, mechanical voice. Through the viewscreen, Hannah could see the 7 civilian ships she was trying to protect. Passenger liners, cargo haulers, a medical transport. Over 1,000 people depending on her plan working. 5 minutes to stellar collapse. She sealed her helmet and checked the escape pod one final time. Everything was ready. 3 minutes to stellar collapse. The star was beginning to show visible signs of instability. Massive solar flares erupted from its surface, and the gravitational distortions were getting stronger. 1 minute to stellar collapse. Hannah took one last look around the bridge of the Harmony's edge. It had been her ship for less than 2 hours, but it felt like home. In 60 seconds, it would be vapor. 30 seconds to stellar collapse. Initiating escape pod launch. The pod shot away from the ship just as the star began its final collapse. Through the small porthole, Hannah watched the Harmony's edge hold its position between the explosion and the civilian ships. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the star exploded with the force of 10 billion nuclear weapons, and space itself seemed to catch fire. The Harmony's edge disappeared in an instant, vaporized by energies beyond imagination. But in that same instant, it cast a shadow, a zone of relative protection where 7 civilian ships waited. The shockwave hit Hannah's escape pod like the fist of an angry god, accelerating her toward the edge of the system at impossible speed. Through the porthole, she could see other escape pods from her crew, also riding the wave of destruction away from the dying star, and behind them, in the shadow cast by their sacrifice, 7 civilian ships rode the same wave to safety. In the observation room, every screen showed readings that should have been impossible. The simulation had never been designed to handle what Hana was attempting. Did it work? Do-hyun asked breathlessly. Vextar studied the displays with growing amazement. She saved them. She actually saved them. But the simulation was not over yet. Hana still had to survive the ride. The escape pod tumbled through space like a leaf in a hurricane. Inside, Hana fought to stay conscious as the supernova's shockwave accelerated her to speeds that made her teeth ache. The small craft was never designed for this kind of punishment, and she could hear metal groaning under stress that should have torn it apart. Through the porthole, she watched the universe burn. The dying star had become an expanding sphere of plasma and energy that consumed everything in its path. But ahead of the destruction, riding the wave like surfers on an ocean of fire, 7 civilian ships raced toward safety. Her plan was working. The Harmony's edge had cast exactly the right shadow, and the explosion's force was pushing the rescued ships away from danger. But Hana was not safe yet. Warning, the escape pod's computer announced in a calm voice that seemed absurd given the circumstances. Hull temperature approaching critical levels. Recommend immediate course correction. With what? Hana muttered, checking her controls. The pod had basic thrusters, but using them now would be like trying to steer a bullet in flight. She watched the tactical display and saw the problem. Her pod was drifting toward a cluster of stellar debris, chunks of matter thrown off by the explosion. At her current speed, hitting even a small piece would vaporize her instantly. But then she noticed something else on the display. One of the civilian ships she had saved, a cargo hauler called the Bright Morning, was following a trajectory that would take it past her position. If she could match courses, computer, calculate intercept course with the Bright Morning. Insufficient fuel for course correction, the computer replied. Hana looked around the tiny pod's interior. Like everything else she had done today, this would require improvisation. She began pulling apart non-essential systems, looking for anything that could provide thrust. The emergency oxygen tanks had small release valves. Not much, but in the vacuum of space, even tiny amounts of gas could provide propulsion. She disconnected the tanks and moved them to the pod's rear hatch. Computer, open rear maintenance hatch on my mark. Warning, opening hatch during flight will result in rapid decompression and probable death. I am not opening it all the way. Hana explained to the machine that could not understand what she was planning. Just enough to vent gas for propulsion. She put on her helmet and checked the seal twice. The pod's life support was already failing from the beating it had taken. She had maybe 10 minutes of air left. Mark. The hatch cracked open just enough for her to shove the oxygen tanks through. She triggered their release valves and felt the pod shudder as the venting gas pushed against its trajectory. It was not much, but it was enough. The pod's course shifted by a few degrees, just enough to intercept the Bright Morning's path incoming. Transmission, the computer announced. Hana activated the communication system and heard a voice, speaking accented Galactic Standard. Unknown escape pod. This is Captain Yoon of the Bright Morning. We see you on our sensors. Are you the one who saved us? This is Captain Lee Hana of the Harmony's Edge, she replied. My ship is gone, but yes, we got you out. Stand by for emergency pickup. We owe you our lives. The cargo ship's tractor beam locked onto her pod just as its power systems finally gave out. She was pulled into the Bright Morning's cargo bay with seconds to spare before her life support would have failed completely. Captain Yoon was waiting for her as she climbed out of the damaged pod. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes that held deep gratitude. Captain Lee, he said formally, I have been flying cargo ships for 30 years. I have never seen anything like what you did today. Did everyone make it out safely? Hana asked. All 7 ships in our group are accounted for. Over 1,000 people safe because of your sacrifice, he paused. But I heard there were more ships in the system. What happened to the others? Hana's expression grew sad. 2 ships were too far away to protect. We lost them. Captain Yoon nodded solemnly. In the real Kepler disaster, 3,000 people died and only 30 survived. Today you saved over 1,000 and lost perhaps 200. That is not failure, Captain. That is a miracle. The simulation began to fade around them as the trial reached its conclusion. Hana felt the neural interface disconnecting, returning her consciousness to the pod on Nexus 7 station. But Captain Yoon's final words followed her back to reality. Thank you for showing us that impossible just means nobody has tried hard enough yet. The simulation bay was silent when Hana opened her eyes. She sat up slowly, removing the neural cables from her head. Her hair had come loose during the trial, and she pushed it back from her face. Around the room, dozens of beings stared at her in complete silence. The displays showed the final simulation results. 11 civilian ships saved, 2 lost, total casualties under 200. It was unprecedented. Instructor Vextar approached the pod, his yellow eyes unreadable. "Cadet Lee," he said formally, "you have completed the Voidwalker trial." "Yes, sir. In 317 years, no cadet has ever succeeded in saving more than 4 ships. You saved 11. I lost 2 ships," Hana corrected. 200 people died because I could not reach them in time. Vextar studied her carefully. "And how does that make you feel?" Hana considered the question honestly, sad but not defeated. Sometimes you cannot save everyone, but that does not mean you stop trying to save who you can. The old Saurak's scarred face showed something that might have been approval, or perhaps recognition. "In the real battle," he said quietly, "I tried to save my flagship along with the civilian vessels. I thought my duty was to preserve the chain of command and maintain order. I failed to understand that sometimes a leader must sacrifice everything, including themselves, to protect those they serve." He gestured to the displays showing Hana's simulation results. "You did what I could not. You accepted loss in order to minimize loss. You turned destruction into salvation." His voice grew stronger. "You have graduated, Cadet Lee. But more than that, you have taught this old soldier something new." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Through the observation window, Hana could see her friends jumping up and down in excitement. Dohyun was crying. Even Minho was smiling. But Hana raised her hand for silence. "Sir, I request permission to remain at the academy." Vextar's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You have earned immediate graduation with full honors. Why would you stay?" "Because this trial has shown me something important," Hana replied. "Every species approaches problems differently. Humans think in ways that other species do not. If we are going to work together in the galaxy, we need to learn from each other." She stood up from the simulation pod and faced the crowd of watching cadets. "I want to help redesign the Academy's training programs, not to make them easier, but to make them teach the kind of creative thinking that saves lives when everything else fails." "And what would you call this new type of training?" Vextar asked. Hana smiled, the same confident smile that had gotten her into this situation in the first place. "Controlled chaos," she said. "The art of turning impossible problems into unexpected solutions." 3 months later, the Galactic Defense Academy introduced new courses in lateral thinking, adaptive strategy, and what came to be known as human-style problem-solving. Enrollment applications from across the galaxy increased by 400%. And in Simulation Bay 7, a new trial was installed. Not one designed to break cadets, but one designed to teach them that the word impossible was really just another word for not yet attempted. The first instructor for these new courses was a young human woman who always tied her hair back before facing a challenge and who had never met a problem she would not try to solve. Her name was Captain Lee Hana, and she was living proof that sometimes the best way to win was to refuse to accept that winning was impossible. At the Academy's graduation ceremony that year, as new officers from dozens of species took their oaths of service, the Commandant spoke words that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. "Today you join a force dedicated to protecting all life in the known universe. You will face challenges that seem impossible, enemies that seem unstoppable, and situations that seem hopeless. When those moments come, remember the lesson taught by Captain Lee Hana. Impossible is not a fact. It is an opinion, and opinions can be changed." In the front row, Hana sat with her friends Dohyun, Minho, and Yuna, all of them now graduates themselves. When the ceremony ended and the new officers celebrated their achievements, she quietly stepped outside onto an observation deck that looked out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that would require every species working together to overcome. But for the first time in her life, Hana felt confident that they would find a way. After all, impossible was just another word for not yet attempted, and humans were very good at attempting things that had never been tried before.